Imagine pouring your entire life, your savings, and your love into your children, only to discover that the people you sacrificed everything for see you as nothing more than a wallet. What would you do if one phone call shattered your heart and revealed a betrayal so deep it would change your life forever? My name is Marta. I always answered my phone the moment it rang. That morning, when I saw Daniel's name, I smiled before I even picked up. I expected the usual clumsy excitement, a question about a recipe, a quick thank you, or a little story about their day. What I heard instead was Sophia's voice, cool and calm, as if she were ordering coffee, not telling me my life had changed. "We already got married yesterday," she said. "We only invited the closest people." The words hit me like cold water. For 3 years I had been their safety net. I paid rent when they were short. I bought the couch they sit on now. I brought groceries when their fridge was empty. I even bought the pale pink dress I thought Sophia would wear to my son's wedding, the dress that hangs in my closet like a promise I never kept. I stood in my quiet kitchen, holding the phone, and felt the house press in. The sofa I had bought sat in their living room. The silverware I had given as a wedding present was being used in photos without me in them. I tried to picture Daniel looking at me and smiling in wedding pictures. Instead, I imagined him avoiding my eyes. I felt smaller than a receipt. I felt like money with a heartbeat. The phrase, "only the closest people," kept repeating in my head until it became a weight in my chest. After I hung up, memories came back in sharp flashes. I remembered the night I paid the deposit on their apartment when their old place flooded. I remembered hauling the heavy box spring up 3 flights of stairs because no one else could. I remember canceling a trip I'd been planning for years so I could send the money for a car repair. Each memory had a small kindness at its center, but now each kindness felt like evidence against me. Later that day I opened social media. There they were, Sophia in a white dress, laughing with people I'd never met, Daniel with his arm around her, proud and distant. I scanned every photo, hoping to find a glimpse of me, a hand, a shadow, anything. My name wasn't in the tags. No one had posted a picture of me smiling at them. It was like being erased from a page I had helped write. I sat on the kitchen chair with the pink dress beside me. The tag was still on the sleeve. I had imagined myself in the dress, standing beside my son, proud and bright. Instead, it hung like a reminder of how little I mattered to them in that moment. Anger and hurt mixed into a hot, heavy feeling. I had given and given without thinking of payback. But the truth was sinking in. Their love had limits, and my place wasn't on the list. I started to add things up. I did not want to, but numbers have a way of telling the truth when words are soft. Rent for 3 years. Furniture. The air conditioner repair. Birthday gifts and holidays. Medical bills I paid when Sophia was scared to go to the clinic. Small transfers, emergency loans, the wedding dress deposit. Each amount looked harmless alone. Together they showed a pattern. I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of receipts and my bank statements. The numbers blurred at first, then lined up cleanly like soldiers. I had taken money from my savings, the money my husband had left me, money I had promised myself would carry me into quiet years. I counted until the total made my hands tremble. Over time, those small payments had become a regular part of my life. I had cut my own needs to help them. I ate simple meals so they could have dinners. I let my vacation plans stay on hold so their rent would be paid. Now I realized I had not been part of the life they were building. I had been the lender, never the invited guest. Tears came, but they were not only sorrow. They were anger and a hard kind of clarity. I felt foolish for letting my whole life hinge on being needed by people who saw need as entitlement. The ledger on my table was not just numbers, it was the map of my loss. A week later, Sophia called again. Her voice was smaller this time, the one she used when she needed something urgently. "Marta," she said, "we're behind on rent. The landlord is threatening to evict us unless we pay this week." I had seen the wedding photos. I had watched them celebrate with other people who were clearly invited. The smell of champagne in those pictures clung to my mind. And now she was calling me, the same woman who'd looked me in the eye and said I wasn't among the closest. Something inside me changed that day. The grief shifted into a hard, clear line. I remembered midnight bank runs, the times I sat up balancing numbers in my head. I remembered giving money and hope until there was none left for me. When Sophia's voice trembled, I answered with a calm that surprised me. "I only help special people," I said. There was a silence longer than any I had felt before. Then she stammered, saying I was like a second mother, that they loved me. Her words sounded practiced, like a script she pulled out when she needed cash. I could hear the old cadence of asking and the old tune of apology. I hung up and folded the pink dress into its box. The fabric smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. For the first time in years I felt the right to put myself first. I walked into the bank the next morning with a steady step. My hands did not shake as they had before. I told the teller I wanted to cancel the automatic transfers I had set up to help Daniel and Sophia. His face showed real surprise. These payments had been as regular as a heartbeat.
"Are you sure?" he asked.
"Yes," I said. I showed him the bank ledger I had made, the same one that had kept me awake that week. The receipts, the dates, the reasons. He reviewed them quietly, then made the change. The sound of the pen closing felt loud in my ears. It was a small, ordinary act, but to me it felt like closing a door and locking it. When I left the bank I felt lighter, like I had taken a breath I'd forgotten I could take. I stopped at a small bakery and bought myself a pastry I used to share with Daniel when he was a child. I ate it slowly, tasting sugar and a new kind of freedom. That evening I made a list of small changes: change the locks, install a camera, open a new account no one else knew about. The list felt like a map. For the first time in a long time I planned for myself and not for their emergencies. I had given a lot of myself away, but I was starting to take back what I still had. I had just started to feel steady when a knock shook my front door. It was late in the evening, and my heart pounded as I peeked through the curtain. There they were, Daniel and Sophia, standing on my porch like shadows from the past. I opened the door halfway, unsure if I even should. Daniel's face was tense, his jaw tight, but his eyes darted like a boy who'd been caught stealing. Sophia clung to his arm, her smile strained, rehearsed. "We thought we'd stop by, Mom," Daniel said, using that word like a key to a lock he no longer owned. I stepped aside slowly, and they entered without waiting for an answer. Their eyes scanned the room, not with warmth but with calculation. Sophia sat on the couch I'd bought them years ago, smoothing her dress like she was staking a claim. Daniel leaned against the wall, avoiding my eyes. They asked about money within minutes.
Rent, bills, groceries.
The words fell like coins in a tin can. I sat across from them, still and quiet, letting their requests pile into the silence. For the first time, I did not rush to save them. I did not open my purse. I only looked at Daniel, and I saw not my son but a man who had learned to treat my love as a bottomless well. The conversation grew heavier. Sophia's voice rose, brittle with anger. "Why are you being so distant? You've always helped us before. What's different now?" I held my hands together to keep them from trembling. "What's different," I said softly, "is that you got married without me. You chose your circle, and I wasn't in it. But now you want me to pay for the circle you chose." Daniel's face flushed red. "Mom, it wasn't like that." He stuttered, searching for excuses. "We just wanted something simple, small." I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. "Then you should live simply too. Don't throw a wedding and then come here for help with bills. That's not my responsibility anymore." The silence after my words was thick. I could see Sophia squeezing Daniel's hand, urging him to say something more. But he looked at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance. When they finally left, the slam of the door echoed through my chest. I leaned against the wood, breathing slowly. My hands shook, but not from fear. It was power, strange and new, that made them tremble. That night, I barely slept, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel crushed under their needs. I felt the faint, fragile edges of freedom. The next week passed in strange quiet. No phone calls. No messages. My house felt empty, yet it was an emptiness I welcomed. I tended to my small garden, cooked meals just for myself, and walked in the park where the autumn leaves fell like soft confetti.
But peace did not last.
A letter arrived, official, stiff, with my name in bold. Inside was a notice a social worker would be visiting me.
My heart froze.
The letter said there had been concerns raised about my well-being. I didn't need to guess who had raised them.
Daniel and Sophia.
They wanted to paint me as unstable, incapable, perhaps even unfit to handle my own money. The betrayal stung deeper than before. Love was one thing, manipulation was another. I prepared. I gathered my bank statements, my receipts, my neatly written lists. I called my doctor and asked for a letter confirming my health. I rehearsed my words in the mirror. When the day came, the social worker sat at my kitchen table, pen ready. She looked at me kindly, but her questions were sharp. I answered each one with clarity. I showed her my documents. I even offered her a pastry from the bakery. By the time she left, Her smile was real. "You're perfectly capable, Marta. Don't worry." I closed the door and leaned on it again, but this time not from fear, from relief. They had tried to strip me of my independence. They had failed. Word must have spread quickly, because within days, Daniel called again. His voice carried a forced sweetness. "Mom, can we come over? We need to talk."
I paused.
Every part of me wanted to say no, to keep the door locked, but I agreed. Some conversations had to be faced head-on. When they arrived, I didn't let them wander my house this time. I kept the door wide open, the space between us deliberate.
Daniel spoke first. "We're sorry.
We didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought you'd always be there for us." That line pierced me, always be there for us. Not because of love, but because of expectation. I realized then that what they called family was really a contract in their minds. I give, they take. Sophia's eyes glistened with false tears. "We're struggling, Marta. We need you." I took a slow breath. "I have been there for you. More than you even realize. But you've treated me like a wallet, not a mother. And I refuse to be both poor and unloved." Their faces shifted, anger creeping back. They muttered excuses, accusations. But I didn't flinch. For the first time, my words were stronger than theirs. They left without a promise to return. And I knew, deep in my chest, that this was the beginning of an ending. The nights grew longer, and the silence thicker, but I learned to live with it. I cooked warm meals, read books I'd once left unfinished, and even signed up for a painting class at the community center. One afternoon, I pulled out an old suitcase. Inside were travel brochures I had collected over the years, always pushing trips aside for someone else's needs. Italy, Greece, even a quiet cabin by the sea. Dreams folded away like laundry. I spread them out on the table. My heart raced at the thought of choosing a place just for me. For once, the money I had saved could serve its rightful purpose. My joy. But before I booked anything, another knock came at the door. This time it wasn't Daniel or Sophia, it was an envelope taped to the frame. Inside was a short, sharp note. "You've abandoned us. Don't expect us to come back." I sat with the letter for a long time. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't ache. Instead, I felt a strange peace. Their words weren't a threat anymore. They were a release. I folded the note and slid it into the back of the suitcase. Then I picked up the brochure for the cabin by the sea and smiled. The ending of one story was the beginning of mine. I spent days quietly adjusting to this new season of life. The silence in my home was no longer heavy, it was healing. I began to notice the little things, the morning sunlight spilling through the curtains, the hum of birds in the garden, the way tea warmed my hands. Still, there were moments when memories of Daniel and Sophia pressed against my chest. I remembered the nights I stayed awake worrying about their future, the meals I skipped so they could eat, the times I wore the same coat for years so they could have new ones. Those sacrifices weren't mistakes. They were love. But love shouldn't come with chains. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to my reflection, "You are allowed to live." I had never spoken those words to myself before. They sounded strange, but they carried a promise. I made a decision that night. Instead of drowning in the hurt they left behind, I would take back my life. I would plant new roots, ones that were just for me. And for the first time in years, I went to bed not feeling like a forgotten mother, but like a woman reclaiming her freedom. I joined the painting class at the community center. My hands trembled as I dipped the brush into color, but soon the strokes began to flow. Each canvas was messy, uneven, yet alive. I painted fields, oceans, even faces I remembered only in fragments. In that room filled with strangers, I found a quiet kind of belonging. No one knew me as Daniel's mom or Sophia's mother-in-law. I was simply Marta, the woman learning to paint. During one class, a kind man named Samuel noticed me struggling to mix shades of blue. He leaned over with a gentle smile. "Try adding just a touch of green. It'll give it more depth." His advice worked, and for the first time in a long time, someone offered me help without expecting anything in return. Walking home that evening, I realized how different it felt to receive kindness freely, without debt or guilt. I began to imagine a life where my identity wasn't defined by my children's needs, but by my own passions. That thought scared me, but it also filled me with quiet excitement. The more I painted, the more I realized, healing wasn't only about letting go. It was also about creating something new. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast, the phone rang. My heart sank when I saw Daniel's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated before answering. His voice was sharp, rushed. Mom, we need money. Things are bad. If you cared, you'd help us. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Daniel, I do care. But caring doesn't mean I have to rescue you every time. You're married now. It's time to stand on your own. There was silence, then anger. You're abandoning me. After everything you've preached about family, you're just walking away. His words cut deep, but I didn't let them pierce me.
No, I said softly.
I'm walking toward myself. He hung up, leaving a ringing emptiness in my ear. I sat down at the table, tears sliding down my cheeks. Not because I regretted my words, but because they were true. That call marked a line I could not step back over. My son saw my love as a lifeline, but I was no longer willing to let him pull me under.
It hurt to let go.
But sometimes love means allowing people to face the storms they create for themselves. A few weeks later, I received another letter. This one wasn't from Daniel or Sophia. It was from the court. My breath caught as I read. They had filed a claim, insisting that I was withholding financial support promised to them. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Betrayal had turned into something uglier, war. My children weren't just asking now, they were demanding, using the law as a weapon. Fear crept in, but I reminded myself of the truth. I had given more than enough. I owed them nothing more.
I sought help.
A kind lawyer named Ms. Patel listened patiently as I told her everything, the wedding, the visits, the social worker, the endless requests.
She nodded firmly.
You've done nothing wrong. We will fight this. For the first time in this battle, I wasn't standing alone. Ms. Patel gathered my records, my receipts, my proof of independence. She spoke with confidence, reminding me of something I had almost forgotten. Justice was on my side. As I left her office, the fear began to lift. My children had dragged me into a courtroom, but I would not bow my head in shame. I would stand tall. The day of the hearing arrived with a chill in the air that seemed to seep into my bones. I adjusted my coat nervously as I entered the courthouse, the marble floors echoing each step like a drumbeat in my chest. The hallways were filled with the low hum of murmurs, the shuffle of papers, and the sharp click of shoes. I felt as though I were walking into a battlefield I had already fought in my mind 1,000 times. When I stepped into the courtroom, my breath caught. It was massive, the kind of place where decisions could change lives in a single gavel strike. The judge's bench towered at the front, a dark, polished wood that seemed to hum authority. Daniel and Sophia were seated together, leaning forward, whispering, their expressions unreadable yet tense. I could feel their eyes trying to pierce me, to make me falter. Ms. Patel, my lawyer, gave me a reassuring nod. Remember, Marta, tell the truth. Stick to what you know. The opening statements began. Daniel's lawyer rose with a polished confidence that made my stomach twist. Your Honor, he began, voice smooth and rehearsed, the plaintiffs believe that Mrs. Richter has neglected her familial duty. They claim she has cut off financial support without justification. I listened, my hands clenched in my lap. Every word was like a stone thrown at my back, but I refused to flinch. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, my legs trembling slightly, but my voice rang clear. I have given over $30,000 to my son and his wife over the past 3 years, I said, letting the number sink in. I have paid their rent, bought their furniture, provided for groceries, even covered medical expenses. I have done this out of love, not obligation. Daniel's face tightened. His jaw clenched. Sophia shifted in her seat, her nails tapping nervously against her leg. His lawyer tried to corner me. But Mrs. Richter, he pressed, didn't you know they were planning to marry? Wouldn't a responsible parent continue supporting her children? I met his gaze steadily. Supporting them does not mean erasing my own dignity. They excluded me from the most important day of their lives. I was not invited to my son's wedding. I was treated as a stranger while they spent my money on luxuries. Love is not measured by how much you can spend to be invisible. The courtroom murmured. I could hear the quiet gasp of those seated behind me. My own heart pounded, but my voice grew stronger, fueled by years of betrayal. Daniel was called to testify. I watched him rise, a mixture of anger and fear in his eyes. I believe my mother is being unreasonable, he began, trying to make his voice sound calm. She has financial resources. She should help us. I held my breath. Every word he spoke was meant to manipulate, to make me doubt myself. But I had come prepared. Ms. Patel handed over my detailed ledgers, bank statements, and receipts. "Your Honor," she said, voice sharp, "this is proof that Mrs. Richter has been more than generous. The plaintiffs are attempting to portray a loving mother as selfish because they were refused access to her funds." The judge leaned back, his face unreadable. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. Sophia bit her lip, trying to hide her anxiety. Expert witnesses were called. My doctor confirmed my health and mental clarity. My friends from the community center testified to my independence and strong social relationships. Even the banker confirmed the rationality of the account transfers I had canceled. Hours passed like minutes, the tension rising with each testimony. Every time Daniel opened his mouth, I felt the old ache of betrayal, but I also felt an unfamiliar surge of courage. I was no longer the mother who begged to be seen. I was a woman reclaiming her life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge retired to deliberate. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes you feel every heartbeat.
2 hours passed. 3.
Every tick of the clock made my stomach tighten. When he returned, he looked directly at me, his expression calm but decisive. "After reviewing all evidence," he said, "it is clear that Mrs. Richter has acted responsibly and generously. There is no legal obligation for her to provide further financial support. This claim is dismissed." Relief flooded me, warm and dizzying. The gavel struck. Daniel and Sophia stared, their faces pale with disbelief. I exhaled slowly, my hands finally unclenching. I had won, not just in court, but in reclaiming my dignity. As I left the courthouse, sunlight spilled over me, and I realized something profound. I was free. Finally free to live for myself. After the court ruling, I walked outside into the bright afternoon sun. The air felt different, lighter, as though the whole world had been holding its breath with me. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from the financial weight, but from the invisible chain of guilt that had kept me tied to Daniel and Sophia. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and paper. I wrote down everything I had endured, not to dwell on pain, but to remind myself how far I had come. Each line told a story. Money sent, sacrifices made, tears shed, boundaries ignored. And then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote one final sentence. It ends here. I folded the paper, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it away in my drawer. It wasn't a letter to them, it was a letter to myself. A reminder that I was done being used. For the first time in years, I went to bed with no unanswered calls, no pending requests, no shame weighing on me. Only silence and peace. Life after the courtroom wasn't instantly easy. There were days when guilt whispered in my ear, reminding me of Daniel as a little boy with scraped knees and big dreams. Sometimes I wondered if I had failed him, if love meant staying even when it hurt. But then I remembered his cold eyes in that courtroom, the way he had turned my sacrifices into accusations. I remembered Sophia's laughter in those wedding pictures I hadn't been invited to. Those memories hardened me when guilt tried to weaken me. Instead of sinking, I began to rise. I picked up books I had put off for years. I planted flowers in my garden, watching their colors bloom brighter than my old sadness. I walked in the evenings, breathing air that felt like freedom. People at the community center began to notice the change. "Marta, you look lighter," Samuel said one afternoon during painting class. I smiled, realizing he was right. The heaviness I had carried for so long was slipping away. I was no longer living as someone's bank account. I was living as myself. One morning, I received a letter, not from the court, not from Daniel, but from a travel company. It was an old brochure I had requested years ago, advertising tours through Italy and France. I had tucked it away when money was tight, convincing myself that dreams were selfish. I ran my fingers over the pictures of vineyards and cobblestone streets. For years, I had delayed my own life, thinking my children's needs mattered more.
But what if now was my time?
That evening, I booked a small group tour through Italy. My hands shook as I pressed the confirmation button, but it wasn't fear, it was excitement. When the ticket arrived in my inbox, I cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. For once, my money was going towards something that fed my soul, not someone else's demands. I packed the pink dress, the one I had once imagined wearing to my son's wedding. It wasn't for sorrow anymore. This time, it was for me. Italy was more beautiful than I ever imagined. I wandered through Rome, Florence, and Venice, every step filling me with wonder. I ate pasta on tiny terraces, listened to music in open squares, and painted the rolling hills of Tuscany. One evening in Venice, I wore the pink dress. I stood by the canals as the sunset reflected off the water. People smiled at me as they passed, and for the first time, I felt beautiful, not because I was someone's mother, not because I was sacrificing, but because I was me. Samuel, who had joined the same tour by coincidence, walked beside me that evening. "You look radiant, Marta," he said softly. I laughed, not out of shyness, but from pure joy. The dress, once a symbol of rejection, had become a symbol of rebirth. I realized then that happiness was not something I had to beg for, or wait for from others. It was something I could create, step by step, choice by choice. And I was finally choosing myself. When I returned home, my life was different. My garden was blooming, my paintings filled the walls, and my heart was lighter than it had ever been. Daniel tried calling once, but I didn't answer. I had no anger left, only acceptance. He had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. One quiet evening, I sat in my living room, sipping tea, the pink dress hanging proudly in my closet. I thought about all the pain, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, and how they had shaped me into someone stronger than I ever imagined. For years, I believed my worth was tied to what I gave to others. But now I understood. My worth was in who I was, not in what I sacrificed. I whispered into the silence, "I am free." And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it.